Welcome back. Now we are continuing our conversation with political analyst Aubrey Matshiqi, and we're talking about calls mounting for President Cyril Ramaphosa to step aside from his position pending the outcome of the ongoing investigations into the robbery that took place at his Phala Phala game farm. And of course, the latest to call for the president to step aside is, of course, ANC veteran Dr. Mavuso Msimang. Aubrey, just to come back to this particular matter. So it's the step-aside rule that you put into context for us that the ANC is applying, some would say, very inconsistently. They would argue that they are not, but it's neither here nor there. If we look at the state of the country right now, we're looking at rising inflation costs, high unemployment rate, food prices through the roof, fuel prices skyrocketing, and, of course, Eskom and the failure to keep the lights burning. Is this a failure, a complete failure on the part of the country? Who should be taking the blame here? Is it the ANC? Is it the government? Is it the president? Who should be pointing the fingers at?
Well, all of the above, Sakina. I have been arguing that South Africa is heading towards a perfect storm of discontent. The discontent of the poor, the working class, and the middle class. And I think we're inching closer and closer each day towards that perfect storm, towards that explosion. Now, when you have one of the most conservative institutions in this country, the Reserve Bank, saying that there is a potential for an explosion, for social and political instability because of the economic woes people are living through, then you know that this potential for an explosion at a social, political, and economic level is there. So my fear is that, first of all, when you look at the ANC, there is a lack of thought leadership. And that lack of thought leadership is a function of a lack of ideas. The ANC basically doesn't know what to do. And secondly, there is too much inward looking on the part of the ANC, focusing too much on what they call renewal and diverting their gaze away from key strategic issues in the country that they should be tackling. But I keep on asking a question, Sakina. And this question is based on the need to differentiate between the revolution and the ANC as an instrument for the advancement of the revolution. And my question is whether the ANC remains an effective instrument for the advancement of the revolution. My answer is no, it isn't. If we agree, even if members of the ANC themselves agree, we should then ask another question. Is it not time to discard it? And my answer is yes. Now, we can do that through the electoral process. But as we saw in November last year, only about 30% of South Africans were eligible to vote decided to vote in the local government elections. What does that tell us? It does not tell us that they are apathetic. What it tells us is that, first of all, they are aware that not voting is a democratic option available to them to pressure those in power to change direction. Secondly, what it tells us is that the majority of voters are losing confidence in the ability of the electoral process to deliver fundamental change in the country. But they're telling us something else. They are telling us that there are no alternatives, which means what they are telling us is that the political crisis which faces the country is beyond the internal political crisis in the ANC. We have a generalized crisis in the country. But maybe the situation is much worse even than this. My own view is that the liberal democratic model will not deliver fundamental change. And therefore, we should have a debate about whether this liberal democratic model we have chosen is a model through which we can deliver fundamental change to our people. The answer to me is no. And therefore, we must have a conversation about what is the alternative. As one Egyptian author put it, the art of revolution is to reach for the impossible. Unlike the art of politics, which is the art of the possible, we should reach for the impossible. And we should do the thinking that takes us there so that we start conceiving of alternatives to the current liberal democratic model. But the immediate challenge we face, of course, is what are we going to do with the worsening lot of our people, particularly those who are black, particularly those who are poor, particularly those who are women, and particularly those who are young and black. Because unless we come with solutions, and we do so yesterday, this perfect storm of discontent becomes inevitable and unavoidable.
So you invoke Egypt through a speaker philosopher, but if we look at what's happening in Egypt at the moment, where you have the entire parliament resigning so that they could actually dissolve parliament and go to early elections, would that be something that South Africa should perhaps be looking at, given how perilous things are at the moment? Because it would seem, at least from a layman's perspective, that nothing is working.
Well, you are right to go back to Egypt. Go to the UK. You saw the protest 2 days ago in the UK. Now, we are going to see similar protests around the world because of the failures of the liberal democratic project and because of the crisis the capitalist system finds itself. As it pertains to South Africa, can what the parliamentarians in Egypt did happen here? I am not holding my breath. That's not going to happen. Because, for instance, when you talk about our electoral system, we are talking about an electoral system which dictates that the member of parliament and a legislature must be more loyal to party bosses than he or she is to the interests of voters and citizens. That's not going to happen, which means as citizens we must start having conversations about how are we going to use the democratic space outside the formal institutional realm of party politics to ensure that we force the institutional formal realm of party politics to deliver change. Now, of course, as I said, the most immediate possibility is to reinstall the confidence of the voter in the electoral process and its ability to deliver change. Beyond that immediate goal lies the conversation about whether the liberal democratic process will help. There are things we can start doing. For instance, we can start having a conversation about the Constitution. Is it not time to have another look at the Constitution and have a conversation about what it is about the Constitution that should change to help us deliver this fundamental change that is so sorely needed in this country? We must have conversations about the electoral system. I am convinced that we need a mixed system in this country, in which system you will have, let's say, in a legislature or a parliament, and now a certain number of parliamentarians or members of legislatures representing political parties and the rest representing regions, districts, or constituencies. We need that kind of mixed system. We can decide what that kind of mixed system is going to look like for us in South Africa to deliver the kind of change we desire. So what we need, as one of the most immediate things to do, is to create a citizen movement for electoral system reform in this country before we start conceiving on long-term conversations about alternatives to the current liberal democratic model.
Final question, and it goes back to where we started, Aubrey. Should President Cyril Ramaphosa step aside, given what's happening with Phala Phala and Farmgate, as it's now become known?
Well, Sakina, if President Cyril Ramaphosa was a head of state in one of the countries whose democracies we mimic, who would have been forced to step aside or even step down by now. I agree with Dr. Mavuso Msimang that the president must foreground, not his own narrow interests, must foreground the interests of the country first, and secondly, the interests of his party. If he does so, he will know that he has no other choice but to step down.
Aubrey Matshiqi, our political analyst, thanks so much for your time this morning and just giving us his views, analysis, perspective on what is currently happening in the country and, of course, the call for President Cyril Ramaphosa to step aside. Let's hand you over to Leanne for some headline news.